sing my theme song. It's time to save some saves. And today we have a few saves from people that are playing their first ever long-term saves at FM. So potential disasters ahead. We start with Hutch CS, who's managing Boston United and Argentina. Second ever save and first save to make it past the second season. We'll count that. Got Boston United to the Prem, but have not broken through. Feel like I never have a shot against the big clubs and was hoping for some pointers and to let me know if I'm stalling or just taking some time to build up the club. I've been trying to bring in as many 5-star wonder kids as I can find. Good. Let the Wonder Kids signing flow through you. However, with all this, I feel like I can never identify if a player, as you'd say, can win the Champions League. I don't know if it's because I'm new and I just don't have the experience, or is there metrics, or are there metrics that specific positions would need to be under that classification? We were asking the right types of questions, and yes, experience does matter a lot when it comes to knowing whether a player can win you the biggest matches or not. And I understand why you've submitted this, because this is your third year in the Premier League and you went 11th and 6th, and now for the first time in your career, you're going backwards. You're now in 9th with no clear route to get up to 6th, which you are 11 points behind with a match in hand. This is a very common spot for people to get stuck in. If you do a ton of research, watch a ton of tutorials, you can rip off a couple of promotions and then battle your way up to the Premier League. But this mid-table to kind of Europa League mediocrity is a very common thing to be submitted to save your saves. But there can be a couple of different causes for this. For you, it is not the desire to sign Wonder Kids. You've clearly been watching SYS. You clearly have been watching some of the tutorials that I make about how to do this stuff. You've been going out and signing those Wonder Kids. But unfortunately, the theory that you were working on is correct. The players that you have on your team right now, that you're giving the time to right now, they're not good enough right now to win you the Champions League. And that's how good you have to be to win the Prem, particularly in the Premier League. And everybody listen to me when I say this. In the Premier League on Football Manager, it is the hardest league to win in the world. There is more money there, there are more great teams there, and as a result, there are more great players. The Premier League snowballs in Football Manager because of the ridiculous amount of TV money coming in. All of the contracts, all of the transfers, they're more expensive. They have more money at their disposal. They sign better players. It is sometimes, depending on your draw, way easier to win the Champions League than actually be able to finish at the top of the Prem. If you don't believe me, go to European competitions later in your save and look at what percentage have an English team even in the final or winning the whole thing. What's your problem in this particular case? You are signing a lot of Wonder Kids, but you have exactly 0 world beaters. In my opinion, looking at your team, you have 1, maybe 2 players that would be able to break into a Manchester City or Liverpool 11. And as a result, when you're doing that and you have a bunch of young guys in your starting 11, you're just not going to be able to compete for that league title. Another issue you have is your reputation is still just 3.5 stars, so you don't have the attractiveness to go after the real world star wonder kids yet. You correct this by staying in the Premier League or maybe winning the Europa League, which you've currently qualified for the last 16 in. That's very good. You are also up against Manchester United going into the second leg of the League Cup semi-final. If you can go on and win that, that would be a big statement that would help raise your reputation and give you something essentially to point at in order to sign the right players. This is very, very difficult for me because it's not like you're signing the wrong players. Guys like Claudio Benavidez are very good, very competent, but he's not a world-class player. Let's take one of your 2 star players in terms of expected playing time, Luis Carlos. This guy sucks at defense, and he's not technically great at offense either. And he's also not that fast. I get it, he has jumping reach and positioning and stuff, but I mean, this guy is a mid-level Premier League player. Your other star player, this guy, center back, doesn't have the technical ability offensively to make up for the fact that he just can't really jump. All of these guys are just good. Even though you're focusing on signing these guys that have this 5-star potential, you're not actually getting 5-star players. How can you change that? Well, your scouting is set up in the old ways of Football Manager. This is the way you would have scouted an FM a couple of years ago, where you've got scouts that are in each different region in the world trying to keep track of what, players might be popping up there. The new way that I've come to prefer is setting any on tactic, any position from tactic, then you bring this down to 1, you have that set there, and you kind of just top assign a couple of scouts. You can give them continents. If you want to really dedicate yourself, you can set a bunch of top and second leagues. What I've done in the saves I've played this year is just set a couple of different groups of scouts to scout the world for Wonder Kids, and what happens is remarkably quickly, the scouts start gaining knowledge of a lot of different countries. But most importantly for me is the manual scouting. Every youth major international tournament, scout everyone. You should know the under 21 players of every major nation and most minor ones like the back of your hand. They should have been scouted multiple times, added to a short list. And that's something you're lacking. You have no short lists. By the time I get to a Premier League point in a save, I have a short list for players that I want to keep an eye on for their development. I have a short list of players that are there basically in case I sell somebody. I usually call this the loan list or the I don't want to do it list, but because they're players that don't necessarily make my team a lot better, but they're players that if they were on my team, I would use them. And so let's say I sell my left back for 50 million. Well, I can go on that list and find a left back for 20 million that I like, and I've netted 30 million in profit. And of course, I always have a short list for key players, guys that I really want to sign that I feel like would make my team better and I really want to keep an eye on. You've got better, which kind of makes sense, and then youngins. But both of these short lists are way too small. By the time I'm at the Premier League level, I have hundreds of people on my loans shortlist, and my key players shortlist usually is longer than this as well. It's a lot of small things, a lot of legwork that will eventually lead to that one big signing. Also, when the next gen Wonder Kid 50 comes in, scout every single one of those players. You have 20 scouts. You can do it. Unfortunately, one of the few things that won't really help you in this position are loans. But that's okay. You can make up for it by grabbing some of this sick loans merch that's available for like another week. That's right. 2 weeks only, and it may even be gone before then because they only gave us a limited number to loan out. Incredibly comfortable. Some would describe it as scintillating athleisure. Available for all of your Football Manager playing needs. It's my first ever actual merch drop, and might I say, it's unbelievably comfortable. So be sure to grab yours while you still can, or you may be able to loan it from someone else. Next, we have Dilliaug. I think that I might have a problem in the size of my squad. It feels like I have too many players for a couple positions, and I don't really see anymore if I should sell or keep them and loan them out. And I need tips on where I need to improve my squad. Don't we all, brother? Don't we all? Dilly is apparently managing RB Salzburg, so they are working for the evil empire here. So we're into the save, and we're just going to check the player numbers. You're at 35 first-team players, and that includes breakthrough prospects and fringe players. Your squad is not, it's not too big. That gives you basically 28 players, a few of which are under 21s to begin with. You do not have a squad size problem. Now, your registration rules are up to 99 players. Admiral Bundesliga in Austria is basically the easiest possible squad registration. If there was no limit to the number of players I could have, I would have more players than this. Let's see, your first season you went unbeaten, your second season things kind of fell off. I'm gonna be honest, don't love the tactic. I was looking at this, poking around the save, double Metsala's in the midfield. There is no defensive solidity at all. It's literally just your two center backs, everybody else. The overload in the wide areas is massive, it's unreal. But if I was doing something like this, I'd probably have a defensive midfielder back here so you at least have a defensive triangle. I would imagine that in Europe, you have not been able to find any real serious success. Lost in the first knockout round both times. Seems like 2 years ago, your team was a lot better than it is now. That's your biggest problem. Your team is not getting better. It's getting worse. Financially speaking, you're filthy rich. 185 million in the bank, nearly 70 million in your original transfer budget. But if you want this team to grow, you've been here over 2 years now, you need to be bringing in wonder kids. It's what Salzburg does in real life. And I'm not talking about somebody like Rocco Simic, who's pretty good, right? But you're going up against the best teams in the world. Rocco Simic is at best a rotation option in that position. He doesn't have the potential to be able to grow into that world-beating type player. The type of player that you should be able to find and sign. Your game to make your team better is not only to fix your tactics so that you have some semblance of a defensive structure, but also to find the wonder kids before the other clubs find them. That might be the oldest mantra of save your saves. If you're in a position and you are playing and making it to Champions League knockouts like the first round, and you're in a smaller league, very common Football Manager save. Everybody loves to manage in a smaller league and try and go and beat Real Madrid. The way you handle that is the oldest SYS mantra in the book. Find the great wonder kids before the other teams. Your team is more talented than the last team we were looking at. You have Ernest Nuama. You have Milos Kerkez. The problem is there isn't that room to grow for these guys. But I really think the problem for you is this tactic, because this team, talent-wise, shouldn't be losing a game in Austria. It shouldn't be close. You dropped points in 8 matches last year, and you only won the league by 7 points. That all comes down to the decisions you're making with the players. Turn this into a 4-3-3, put one of these guys on a more defensive role, or at least deep lying playmaker on defend, and watch how much better you're able to handle, particularly the counterattack that I'm sure you face all the time. Next! Rimstar, managing Napoli. Hi Z, seems Italy is a really terrible league for me to manage in, but here we go anyway. My Napoli team's completely fallen off in the last month. The mentality and spirit to win is totally gone. I don't know how to get it back. Felt that it would have come back against Juve, but we conceded very late. I joined this team as part of a journeyman, and the tactic I'm using helped us climb the league very rapidly and start this season very well, but I very much feel like Ange at the moment. Great going forward, but no structure at the back. Well, good for you. We were just solving that problem. So where are we at in the league? 9th in the league with 28 points from 18 matches. And how long have you been at this job? This is your second season checking in with Napoli after winning the Super Cup last year. Nice. Last year you squeaked to 7th place finish, and this year the fall off, like you said. Oh, hello. Great start to the season. You're probably feeling like you're $1 million, and then all of a sudden that. Your only win being at Levski Sofia in the Conference League. You lost to Aris, you drew Vitoria Guimarães, and you started dropping losses to Spezia, to Lecce. This is a full-on disastrous collapse. Amazingly, your atmosphere, cohesion, leadership, support, they're all still good. The number one thing I would recommend doing when this happens, even you lose 2 or 3 games, you go winless for 3 or 4 games, do an encourage team talk, right? You need to sit, hey, fellas, don't let our heads drop. This is one of the most reliable team talks you can have. If your goal is one thing, and over the last 5 matches, only the last 5 matches, you've been underachieving that goal, you can come in here and do that talk, and then all of a sudden you're hitting a summary where every single player on your team, their morale's going up. I often describe this as my golden bullet. This is the starter pistol you fire off to wake your team up. And the next match you play after this one is very important because it's the one that provides you the opportunity to break out of that slump because your team is now believing in the process again. There is, of course, the added thing you can do, which is going in, discussing and praising conduct. You can do that on every single player, and it will raise the morale of every single player. Because the silent killer and the biggest contributing factor to these types of runs is a deterioration in morale that happens from a blowout loss, or, always annoyingly, if you have a long win streak and then you lose, that is a huge hit to morale. So it is not entirely unusual to have Football Manager go 5 wins in a row and then all of a sudden we go winless in 3 because we lost and then we lost our mental edge for the next match or 2. It's all about being able to pull yourself out of that type of situation. The team talk is a fantastic weapon for it, and the praise conduct is also a fantastic weapon. Although I typically break out the praise conduct thing if I butcher a team talk or something, that'll allow me to recover some of the morale that I lost. Taking a look at your tactic, you do have the 2 playmaker combination, which I usually advise against. It can work, especially when you have somebody on attack and defend, but what you'll note about playmakers is they're often not looking to score, and that means you only have 1 potential goal-scoring threat from your midfield. This is a very classic-looking 4-2-3-1. Having 2 complete wingbacks on support really destroys your ability to defend on the wings. Now, the current tactic I'm using on my Twitch save where I'm playing in Brazil, I have 2 complete wingbacks on attack, but I'm making allowances for that to be able to survive. For one thing, I have a defensive midfielder or a ball-winning midfielder on defend in this spot instead of a playmaker who doesn't, carry the same water defensively. My tactic is also all the way up, which doesn't give them as much space to try and take advantage of the fact that my fullbacks are wandering all over Kingdom Come. And I have wait for overlaps on, which tells my complete wingbacks exactly where to go instead of them just kind of wandering around into the middle, which they still do sometimes, but not nearly as much when I tell my wingers to hold the ball and wait for them to get up there. In my estimation, this helps prevent those sorts of turnovers that catch your fullback making their way about halfway up the field, and then they're not a part of the attack, helping out, but they're also not part of the defense. Complete wingback is a role that very few players can play very well, and I'd be willing to wager that the ratings on your complete wingbacks, particularly this guy, 6.58 over his last 5 matches, indicate that you're probably not getting the best out of these players. There's nothing wrong with doing a wingback on defend, or one of my personal favorites, a fullback on support, which still provides players that have offensive desires to take advantage of them, but is a much more defensively solid position. But incredibly, for a 4-3-3, I think this tactic lacks a lot of structure defensively. 2 playmakers, center mid on support, both the wings on attack, so they're not getting back at all. You could put these guys marking specific players on the opposition fullback they're next to, so your left wing would be working against the right back. You could do that on both of them if they're athletic enough. That would help account for any defensive deficiencies created by the double complete wingback, but based off the ratings, you really just shouldn't be playing complete wingback. You're playing complete wingback because you want to be able to do that, but your players just aren't those guys. I mean, Abubakar Diaz is good. Just let him use that work rate, that technique, that crossing to get up and down the wing and make plays. I think even a fullback on attack that would use his directness and work rate to get up the field and deliver crosses would be more effective than a role that is asking a ton of things like off the ball and positioning and teamwork. You see highlighted when I'm over a complete wingback here, which he's just not going to be doing particularly well. Design the tactic for the players you have. This is what's something that all of the teams ahead of you in the league table have in common. They've given up less goals. I'm not saying don't be aggressive. If you ball up in a shell in Football Manager, you're always going to get punished for it. But just make sure that you have enough guys around to be able to defend. Not every counterattack is just unlucky. I fall into that trap a lot too. I get counterattacked on stream and I'm like, this is ridiculous. They made every perfect pass. But if you're giving a team the opportunity to get odd man rushes consistently, you probably need to change something. As for double playmakers, just pay attention to where the ball's being funneled. Because when a person has a playmaker role, the ball is funneled to them. Players receive the ball and look to pass it to them. Just make sure that Sion and Zane, the way they play, the way your other players play, that they're getting that ball in different positions and that it's not detracting and that they're not both just showing for the ball. Next, K. Dava, managing Merthyr Town. I'm 26 seasons into a Welsh-only save with the smallest Welsh team in the English pyramid. Love this. We are now a well-established Premier League club with high reputation, perfect facilities, and a near-constant Champions League qualification. But my ultimate goal of winning the Premier League remains out of my grasp. Since I can only sign Welsh players, I spend overs on young Welsh players and try to develop them into stars. But I need help in how to take that final step. This is a very interesting save. This is like the expert course of Save Your Saves right here. You have taken a Welsh-only team, the lowest Welsh team in the English pyramid in this game, all the way up to the Prem. It's 2049. You're trying to pull off that magic moment. Your left back's name is Robert Roberts, which is the Welshest thing that's ever Wales. Looking at the Welsh national team, you basically, unsurprisingly, because you also manage the Welsh national team, have a finger on the pulse of the entire team. I get the feeling that you have signed basically all of the Welsh players that you want on your team, so it's not like transfers. Transfers just don't have anything to do with this. I mean, by far the most important thing for you is to keep your players on your team. This is like playing with Athletic Bilbao. If you let players get away from you, that is going to cost you everything because you don't have a replacement. You're managing a national team in the Premier League. So what it all comes down to is the tactic. And this feels very familiar. You have 2 roaming wingers. You've got 2 tackle harder forwards. And then you've got these 2 segundo volantes. Like I said, this is an expert course in Football Manager. So I have just some minor recommendations that might be able to help your team out. Because looking around the players, you're going to need a little bit of help. Right? Your tactic's going to have to punch well above your weight because you're not going to be able to build an entire team of overwhelmingly world-class players in the way that you would typically do that in FM. Double Segundo Volantes, it just doesn't call on that defensive duty of the players. It just doesn't. I'm going to tell you to check something out here. Just do this. Just do that. Just do that. All right, I have been talking with very smart tactical people recently in Football Manager. If you put players on DM on support, They will get there. They will make those runs in the box, but they are going to be much more responsible defensively. They're going to lean into that defensive ability. You're going to get the defensive box that everybody's looking for. And you get Gethin Rowlands as a target forward. Try deep lying forward. Okay, that still has hold the ball up, but it doesn't have dribble less. All right, Gethin Rowlands is not the greatest dribbler of all time, but the whole point of this tactic is that you're going to a lot of people moving around. And if Gethin has the opportunity to carry the ball forward himself because all of the other markers are distracted, you want to give him that opportunity. Okay, he is not physically capable of being a competent target forward in the Prem. You don't want to tell him to not dribble, but being a deep lying forward, that works because he has the first touch. He has that ability to hold the ball up. Now, I would train play short, simple passes onto him because he's never going to be a good passer. And if you can train that onto him, that's going to cut down on the number of mistakes he makes by trying to overcomplicate things as a deep lying forward. Because obviously we're doing that because it fits the tactic and he has the first touch to do it. But honestly, until you have that trained on him, I might just play him as a pressing forward so he goes out there and uses his work rate and his intelligence to just kind of wreak havoc. And those guys can definitely still score. Also, I think the biggest mistake you're making in your tactic is the gap between your lines. You already have a natural gap between your lines. You're just exacerbating it with this. If you go standard, right, you're already getting, like, this gap is already present here. You've got your attack, and then you've got your defense that's kind of sitting a little deeper. If you go lower, you're creating a truly unholy amount of space between front four and back six. Now, you have the mark tighter on the wings. I'm assuming that's so that they are able to follow back and help out defensively a little bit more. But that's going to be harder if your back line keeps dropping when you're down here. This sort of tactic, like alignment, it can work. Not when you have four guys up here. If you have four guys up here, this is just insane. Because they're pressing and then there's kind of nobody to back it up. Right, like let's say if this press is successful, you've got both the center backs, both the wing backs. A midfielder dropping in here is going to get the ball and have an hour and a half to do anything. Right, now maybe those two Segundo Volantes, you're hoping to counter that, but then they're just sprinting way forward. Right, and they're just leaving more space between them and the center backs. Catch those lines up. Look, honestly, I would go with a high back line. I don't know if you're trying to do this save without it, but I'm willing to wager that you're doing a save that's hard enough that you don't need to try and win the Premier League with a low back line. It is possible. It is also harder because, name one top team in the world that plays in a deep block. There's your answer. Next, we've got Spin, who's managing Barcelona. This was my first long-term FM save. At first, I spent way too much money for dumb things like loaning Endrick for $16 million, only to have 2 sub appearances. I am now trying to fix the team, but no matter what I do, I can't really get club finances up. We keep getting close to being positive, but just cannot. I'm willing to sell any players as my registration is all screwed. I think I keep buying people too willy-nilly and it's hurting my finances. I also feel like I am not winning enough, so tactical help would also be appreciated. Oh, so this is just a big steaming pile of everything, it seems like. My favorite. So it's 2030 and this person managing Barcelona has finished either second or first every season. And it looks like in their job history, they have managed Barcelona the entire time and also managed Honduras and Spain, which is awesome. That's a lot of fun. A great type of save to be playing in your first season. But one of the things that, especially if you're coming from like FIFA or whatever, that is so easy to overlook is the registration. And I'm just going to come into the dynamics. I see you've got one player that says they've been treated unfairly too many times, and that's Jarell Hato. I was kind of expecting more based off what you were saying. I'll say this, though. Never a good idea when you have a guy with 19 vision who's not registered. But I have the solution to your financial problem. All you've done is hoard incredibly expensive players. You know how you solve that? You sell the guy that's not registered for $100 million. Better yet, you sell one of this large collection of incredibly talented players for a bucket of money. You didn't inherit a great financial situation to begin with. Barcelona, obviously, even in Football Manager, is struggling financially. But the biggest reason that people managing major clubs have financial issues is because they don't actually sell the assets they have on their team. You are definitely in that category. You have 4 unbelievable world-class attacking midfielders. You don't need all of them. You don't want to go hunting a transfer, right? But when you get an offer for somebody like Pedri and it's 150 million, even if it's not up front, you take that and you go sign a wonder kid from Brazil for 20 to 25 million because you've got that great scouting network set up and you've just made a ton of money. Buy low, sell high. When you're a huge club, buying high is not a bad idea. You're going to use that guy for 5, 6, 7 years and then he's going to retire or whatever. Maybe you use him for even longer than that. That's great. But to be frank, when your club has these types of values and you've got somebody like Jarell Honto and whatever, you just shouldn't be in debt. Because you've got a ton of money, you've got a ton of money in the transfer budget. If you see those undeniably world-class wonder kids out there, you can make that move instantly if you want to. But if you have this much value in your team, you should never be $300 million in debt. Ever. Because I guarantee you, you're getting transfer offers north of 70, 80 million for a couple of your players every year. And you could negotiate those out, especially if you start adding installments to 140, 150 million for some of the better players you have on your team. Do that. Trust your ability to replace them. Don't just trust the name on the jersey. And may your saves be successful. My job here is done. If you want to watch me save more saves, though, there you go. We're saving more saves right up there. Happy holidays, everybody. Hope you have a good one. Have a good December. What was this? How can I never do that again?